we'll get started. Thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Shauna Bernal Fields. I'm a resource soil scientist in Boise, Idaho. And Tasha is here with me. She's going to help moderate and help me swap screens. So yeah, today we are celebrating World Soils Day. So this year's theme is soil and water, a source of life. So have you ever pondered what lies beneath your feet? The soil is our most precious natural resource. It performs all kinds of vital ecosystem functions for us, including growing our food, storing and filtering our water. Things live in it. We build our infrastructure on it. Whether you're blissfully unaware or not, soil is important to your life. Now, we don't have unlimited soil. You know, it doesn't just appear overnight. It forms over geologic time. So it's important we don't let it just wash away or blow away because we can't just replace it. One of the reasons I want to talk to you today too is to inspire you to conserve our soil. So our current population is about 8.1 billion the last time I checked online. So that's a lot of mouths to feed. So all those people are relying on the soil for food and water and all those other ecosystem services we talked about. Now, not all of our soil is great for sustaining life. Any guesses as to what percentage of our world is well-suited soil for production? Go ahead and put it in the chat if you have a guess on what percent. Give me a number, throw it in there. Cindy, you overachiever, you. Any other guesses? Okay, so I'm seeing a 3%. All right, so I got a piece of fruit here. This is going to represent Earth. 26. All right, a little more generous. So if you remember back to elementary school, if I can get my apple to cooperate, so I pre-sliced this so I wouldn't cut myself on camera. So if I've got the world here in my hand, 3/4 of Earth is water. There's a half, and there's another third. So we only have 1/4 that is land. So that's this section here. Now, of all the land, not all of that is great for growing. We've got our mountain ranges and polar ice caps. So we're gonna cut that in half and throw that out. All right. So now we're down to, mostly soil here. But then we've got the soils that are too much, too salty, too rocky, too steep, whatever. So we're gonna cut that section out. Now we're left with this sliver here. Now soil doesn't go all the way down to the core of the earth. It's just a sliver, a skin. So we just take the peel off. So yes, this represents about 3% roughly that is naturally well-suited soil for that food and fiber production. Just a little illustration of why it's important to conserve. All right, so now Tasha, if you want to share screen for me. All right, next slide. Okay, yeah, there's our official theme, soil and water, source of life. Next one. So we're going to focus mainly though on the water part of the functioning of the soil. So that the water and the soil are intricately connected. Healthy soils enriched with organic matter play a crucial role in regulating water retention and availability. So I live in the arid West. So most of our agriculture in this part of the world is very much irrigation dependent. The significance of anything that's going to boost the water holding capacity of soil cannot be emphasized enough. So next, let's dive into some of the soil properties that are related to this water relationship. So really it goes down to the most basic foundational concept of what is soil. Main part I want to focus on this is you'll notice the dark line right across the middle of the pie chart. Half of a healthy soil should be pore space, which, the first time I learned that little fun fact of that, I'm like, that's significant. So all the pits I looked at where I've mapped, granted, they're not all prime farmland. There's some degraded places I've been, but I was like, I don't know that any of them were near that volume of porosity that it should have in order to do all those ecosystem functions. And then, should have some of those filled with air, some of those filled with water. We also have, of course, our mineral fraction, and last but not least, even though it's small, it's mighty, the organic matter. Next slide. All right, so knowing that half of it should be pores, we should be doing more to protect our porosity. You know, these are the highways that the water is going to infiltrate and permeate through our soil profile.
Look at my
And, you know,
toes.
size matters. There's micropores, but they're
scaly.
small as like the tip of a needle, all the way to
On
macropores.
top. Yeah, it's dry.
Porosity is related to soil aggregates
Ouch.
in structure. You know, we want our soils to build up. We don't want to degrade them.
Mm.
So in this image on the left, I like it. You can see a soil that has some really nice spaces in between the particles. If I was a water drop, I can picture myself in the upper corner. Yeah, get the mouse. Okay, you could follow the little red dot. It could follow that channel easily into the soil profile. You know, we've got good connectivity up to the surface. So that's what we like to see. Versus the image on your right, you'll notice we don't have those big gaps. It looks to me like the pores have collapsed and they're now plugged. You know, that's no bueno. That's going to create ponding, anaerobic conditions, that leads to, you know, breeding pathogens and disease, drown out our plants, or maybe it just never makes it in, just sits there until it evaporates. So let's look at some the factors that can lead to our porosity either increasing or decreasing. You know, some of the factors are inherent, you know, so like people, some things are genetic, it inherits the properties from its parent material. Other things are, you know, environmental or management induced. We call those dynamic properties. Next slide. Okay. Organic matter. So that includes those billions of microorganisms that should be in your healthy soil. I love these images. I think it's so fascinating to visualize what these critters look like. Kind of reminds me of things I was like sci-fi horror films. Like that dude in the upper right corner, check out, you know, his mouth parts. I mean, that looks like a trimmer. So these are important for nutrient cycling. So there's, I don't even know, countless species that you should have in your soil. And they all, you know, perform their own little niche. They're secreting natural glues like glomalin that help bind our soil particles. You know, they'll eat each other. And then when, you know, they're lysing cells, that's releasing bioavailable nutrients and proteins into the system for other microbes and plants to absorb. And then I'm just looking at the diversity. Look at the different body types. You know, some of them look like swimmers, some of them look like crawlers. So depending, you know, if they're one of those air-filled pores or one of those water-filled pores, I just think they're really cool looking. So yeah, we want to increase our organic matter because it builds up our soil structure, adds that fluff factor, increases water holding capacity. So we're letting that water enter our profile and we're holding on to it longer. All right, and our fourth piece, the biggest chunk, is that soil mineral fraction, or sand, silt, and clay. Mainly just this image, I wanted you to pay attention to the relative size difference. Just look how massive sand is compared to an individual clay particle. And again, this is an example of one of the inherent properties of soil. Next slide. So here's a microscopic image of sand, and just they're huge. They're like a big beach ball. You know, it's silica, so it doesn't have a charge. Notice the big spaces in between the particles. So a coarse soil that's predominantly sand is going to have, you know, a lower water holding capacity because there's nothing to grab onto it. It's going to shoot right through. It's going to have a gritty feel when you're texturing. All right, next slide. Now we've got our silt particles. You know, they're the mid-size, kind of roundish. You can still see some spaces between, but it's not as big as in the sand. This will feel kind of slick when you're ribbing the soil. Next slide. And my favorite, the clay. The clay at, you know, the individual particle level is platy. This is really cool to see the scale. It's our smallest particle, and depending on your mineralogy, it's going to behave different. We have what we call 1-to-1 clays, and that's like your kaolinites. These ones don't shrink and swell, and they'll just like loosely adhere the soils to the surface. Versus 2-to-1 clays, like our smectites, those are the ones that shrink swell, they've got a different crystalline structure. You got a octahedral sheet sandwiched between two tetrahedral sheets, kind of like a Oreo cookie. And it's got a charge. So it lets the water get in between those and bind, since, you know, the one end of H2O molecules got a little more positive charge to it. So it lets it grab that water and hold on to it for longer. So some other features of the soil that affect water movement. These ones are pretty common in southern Idaho. Durpans. So these are cemented horizons, either cemented with silica and or carbonates, and they can act like an aquitard and perch the water. There's also bedrock materials. Paralithic is our softer sediments, like in the Treasure Valley. We call that a Sihar horizon. And then you step in the volcanics, you might get a layer of basalt in our horizon. Another one that I could throw up here, if you have a really heavy clay layer, we call an argillic, a clay pan, that can limit water movement. Next slide. All right, so some of the key soil-water relationships I wanted to talk about with you today are infiltration, permeability, and water holding capacity. I like this diagram. It's got a lot going on actually when you stare at it for a bit. So I interpret it as this pretty saturated soil. We've got these green blobs in the middle. Those are your organic matter. Then you've got the orange brown colored ones, and that's your mineral soil, sandstone clays. And then you see the little blue bubbles. Those are little water molecules filling up those micropores. And you notice together that makes kind of a round aggregate. So we're seeing several little aggregates. And then in between are the larger macropores with the blue arrows, where the gravitational water is being pulled down by gravity through the profile. Now, see, if you, after the water stops, whether that be irrigation or precipitation event, you let set for a good 24 hours or so, all that gravitational water from those macropores should drain away. And then you're left, you know, at field capacity. And so hopefully, if you've got a decent amount of aggregation and organic matter content, your soil won't be bone dry that quickly. It will have all these little water molecules still bonded inside the aggregates, and that'll make our microbes happy because they don't like it bone dry either. Some of the other forces that play besides the gravity is we have some adhesion and cohesion going on between the water molecules themselves and then the organic matter and the mineral surface. Also, they didn't put it in here, but they could have had a plant root. You know, the roots act like a straw. They can form suction, capillary action, and then have an opposing force to the gravity and suck the water up. So that's a little bit of the physics and forces behind what's going on in our soil profile. Next slide. So infiltration, that's referring to right where the water penetrates from the surface into the soil right at the top. And we typically measure that rate in inches per hour. Generally, the finer the texture, slower the water is to infiltrate, and the coarser, the faster it goes. Now, this is important when you're talking about irrigation schedules. It answers how much water, how often. If you don't count for it, you're going to get either runoff or, you know, poor infiltration. I really like this image on the top left there. They added some blue dye. And so it looks to me like, you know, the water infiltrated pretty quickly in that upper foot, but then it hit some restriction. It could be texture change, something there, and it slowed down. And then you notice the water had to access either a root channel or a macropore to make it further down into the profile. And then the picture below is just one of the field tests we can do, just an infiltration ring in the ground, pour a known volume of water in, so and time it how long it takes to infiltrate. Next concept, permeability. So once the water has infiltrated the surface, then we're looking at how quickly the air and the water move through the profile. And that was also measured in inches per hour. And this is where those restriction features really come into play again. So this is a photo of a bomber Durpan in Ada County. That thing's over a foot thick. That's definitely going to stop your water. It's not getting past that pan unless it finds a crack somewhere. Flood. All right, permeability, the factors, key properties that affect that are going to be your texture, your structure, and your pore size. So on the left-hand side, we've got sandy soil, and the blue lines represent the, the pathway that the water might take between particles. Notice they're pretty straight. And again, sand doesn't grab the water, so it's gonna, shoot right through. Then in the middle, if you move up to something a little more loamy, a little more structure to it, it's going to slow that water down. It's going to have to find, if it's prismatic, for example, some cracks to access. And then on the far right, we have an example of a very heavy, as far as like clay content soil. Remember all those plates that we saw in the microscopic view? Or I've seen a lot of silty soils that if they're degraded, as far as like no aggregates, once you get them wet and then they dry, they plate up. And so that has very slow infiltration. It has a very tortuous path. You can see zigzagging back and forth between the plates. And then, of course, depending how many pores you have or lack thereof, that's also going to impact how your water's doing. Next slide. Maybe. Oh, there it is. All right. Water holding capacity. So, a healthy soil, it's like a sponge, and it should be storing moisture for plants to access between precipitation or irrigation events. Water holding capacity also depends on your clay content, your organic matter content, and porosity, amounts, and the continuity. How well connected are those pores? I mean, do they go well into the profile, or are they just like dead end in the first couple of centimeters? That matters. Little fun fact, 1% increase in organic matter in the top 6 inches of soil in an acre equates to the soil being able to hold 2,800 more gallons of water. Now here in the desert, that's a big number. It sounds impressive to me. Anything that helps boost it's great. All right, some other factors that can influence our soil-water relationship is if we get compaction, or more common problems. Obviously, this happens from a lot of disturbance. For example, if you drive over a saturated soil, which you should never do, and make several passes, you're going to collapse and plug all your pores. And then you might get a layer that looks like the image there in the bottom left where the red arrow is. The top horizon, I can still see some roots and a couple of pores. But when you hit that second horizon, it looks like a brick. I don't see anything. Your water is going to have a hard time permeating through there. Some solutions is obviously disturb it less, adding organic matter to fluff it up. And you could also do something like plant a cover crop, especially anything with like a tuber with big roots that'll break up that compaction layer over time. Homeostasis is the goal. We want to balance. You don't want it too wet. You don't want it too dry. It's too wet, again, we get anaerobic conditions, kill off plants, breed disease, problems. It's too dry. Similarly, you'll nuke. Your microbes are gonna dry out because they need water too. It's gonna lower your soil fertility, drought stress your plants. Leaching is also a big concern. Obviously, paying for the water bill to pump irrigation, or if you're getting commercial fertilizers, it's not cheap. You don't want that to leave, your field. You want it to stay where you want it. You don't want it going into our waterways, because then we get the problem of eutrophication. So I got a picture here, probably, most famous dead zone on the planet there, the Gulf of Mexico, where all the excess nutrients from the Mississippi get dumped. And then we got this, oxygenless zone of death. So we want our soil to filter our water and hold on to these nutrients, not leach them out. Next slide. All right, so I got a little demo here. Let me swap over. Okay. Tasha's going to help me out. So we've got a sandy soil in 1 cup here. And we'll bring that one over. And then we've got a finer soil that textures out as a clay. It's over 40%. It has been sipped though. And then I've got just some colored water here, some food coloring that can represent whatever pollutant du jour, nitrate, phosphate. just a little something to look at, a little dramatic flare. So we're gonna pour this in and see, you know, what kind of differences do we notice in the behavior of the soil. All right, ready, Tasha? Pour this in. Put a little saran wrap in there just to buffer it a little so it doesn't make a crater. Can you all see that? So our sandy soil is starting to collect water in the catchment beneath. I haven't seen it make it through the fine soil yet. It still seems to be wetting up the profile. Oh, one drop. Slowly starting. So we can already see there's a significant difference in the rate at which the water is moving. When I did this last week, hopefully we'll also see color difference as well, which we have to start getting a little more collection. Well, we could let that run for a little bit and come back to it.
Sure.
Okay. All right, we'll switch back. Okay. So our soil, if we would add some organic matter, we could have changed some of these properties. But like I said, in general, our sandy soil is going to have lower water holding capacity, so pretty much the entire volume is eventually going to make its way through. You're just going to dry out. You're going to have to irrigate a sandy soil more often. And our finer soil, it will slowly let the water through, and then it's not going to let go of all of it. It's going to keep some of it because it's got a higher water holding capacity with all that clay. And there will also be a color difference, you know, because again, this clay has a charge, so it can bind with nutrients, pollutants, and other things. So it's, you know, it's our first layer Brita filter Mother Nature's got. Starting to come through. Yeah, this one's taking a little slower this time. Okay, so how can I improve the soil's ability to filtrate, store, and filter the water? Well, that takes us to our classic principles of soil health. So if it's good for the soil, it's going to be good for the water because our soil is what holds it and filters it. So our basic principles: keep the soil covered, disturb it less, diversify what you've got growing, and keep a living root in it throughout the year. And of course, I don't like to leave out the bonus principle, which is livestock integration. Here, I can give you an update. Let me swap real quick. Okay, so it's going to take a little longer, but there are some early results and it gets closer. So the sandy soil is on this side, my right hand, and then we've got the fine soil on the left. So I could say you see a volume difference, a rate difference in the leachate, and there's a significant color difference. So yeah, in the sandy soil, it went in blue and it came out blue. In the clay soil, it's a very different color. So yeah, our clay soil is definitely acting as a better filter and obviously binding with some of the color elements. I'll let that keep running. All right. All right, next slide. So let's dive into that. Keep it covered. I really like this image because there's nothing I dislike more as a soil scientist than rolling past a fallow field. Bad for my blood pressure. Because if you don't have armor on your soil, there's nothing to keep it from washing away or blowing away. And this is a great image here on the left of the impact of raindrop at a very small scale. I just picture, you know, it's like a bomb going off. And there, what your aggregate. You got detachment, core plugging, and you got runoff. It's slide. All right, so here's an example that we did a couple years ago in Weiser, Idaho, about an hour from where we're at. We have 2 fields here. They're only about 1.5 miles apart. It's the same soil series, Cannon Oak, same landform. You know, we controlled for all the factors other than management. So site A, at the southern end of the map, that had some soil health practices implemented. As far as they had alfalfa, then they went to no-till wheat again, and they also left stubble. They didn't leave the field completely naked and fallow. Versus site B, that was more conventional. It went from alfalfa to wheat to onions to beets and back to onions. So we also had a lot of crops in there that require a lot of disturbance to harvest. And then they, more conventional, in fact, they left not a speck of straw. You can see the picture in the top, that's site B, the conventional. So you may notice there's some water ponded in the furrow. This was like, I think 24 hours after a rainstorm had passed by. And then on the image to the left of site B, I don't know if you can see it really well, but there's water in the ditch. So we got runoff. Versus site A, the same day, you know, that field has stubble on it and it had better aggregation. We have no standing water and there's no water in the ditch. We also took soil samples, and next slide, from these 2 fields. And I did a similar demo as what we're waiting on today. So again, site A had some soil health practices. Site B was conventional. So the picture on the left, this was 10 minutes after I poured the water in the jerky tubes. Granted, it was an obscene amount of water. This would be like a gully washer of it. But you'll notice that there's no water in the catch of the conventional till yet after 10 minutes, but all the water has passed through the soil that had health practices. It is pretty turbid, but you know, it made it through in a relatively quick time. Then the photo on the right, because that conventionally tilled soil was still ponded, I was curious how long this is going to take, so I just let it sit and let it run. Came back 2 days later, it's 48 hours. And you can see that conventionally tilled soil is still ponded. Only about half the water has made it through. And then we look at the leachate, you notice the healthier soil, like I said, it was turbid. There was, you know, some soil particles that made it through, but now that they've settled, it's actually pretty clear. You know, I don't think it leached a lot of the nutrients. Versus site B, like, so got that orange tea color. So we're losing some organics there, or could we represent fertilizer or whatever else. So I just thought that was a great local example of where soil health practices and management matter for how the water will infiltrate and permeate through. Okay, next slide. All right, so our next principle, minimize disturbance. And I don't just mean physical, which we all think of. Granted, I mean, that still matters too. If you can lessen how many times you drive over the field, that's great. But that also includes chemical disturbance in the form of like fungicides, chemical fertilizers, fumigates, whatever, and biological disturbances, which may look like overgrazing. We want to minimize as much as possible all of those. One of the reasons why this is a picture of mycorrhizae fungi. You know, these guys form a symbiotic association with plants, and they also act like highways, moving water and nutrients between the soils and plants. They're also sensitive to being in a fallow field. Studies have shown their numbers greatly decline after tillage as well, and they use broad spectrum fungicides. They are pretty important. A lot of studies are now showing, you know, if you don't have a better balance of bacterial to fungi ratios, your soil isn't reaching its full capacity. It seems to be a lot of the degraded soils are more bacterial dominant. So these fungi, these are helpful. They can increase the surface area by 40-fold. I was like, wow, I mean, because think about it, a plant, if it's not happy where it's at, it can't just pack up its roots and leave. So anything that can increase its reach to mine the soil for water and nutrients is going to help it out. Next slide. Diversity. I love this poster from our agency. So talking about range health, soil health. You know, if you've got a diverse set of plants, so in this example, we've got, you know, our sagebrush shrub community. We've got perennial bunch grasses. We've got forbs, you know, and they all have very different root structures to different depths. And so they're accessing way more of the profile versus the plant on the far right that represents an invasive annual weed like cheatgrass or medusa head that look, you know, they have sad little micro roots just that barely make it through the first horizon. And then, you know, they're going to make a mat of death and catch on fire. So this is why we like diversity. And then, you know, obviously the perennials are going to feed our soil microbes year round too. Keep a living root. Again, fallow is not our friend. I mean, our microbes are living. They're just like us. They need food, they need water, they need shelter. I mean, if you spend all winter with no food or water or clothing, you would not be operating at full capacity. So keep a living root in there. All right, integrating livestock. So this image I borrowed from Christine Jones. I think it's really neat. It's again, same soil. It was down a fence line kind of situation. So the difference is based on dynamic properties from management decisions. So on the left, you'll notice the profile has this rich brown color throughout from top to bottom. I can see roots going all the way. I can see structure. It's pretty good looking soil. Versus on the right, and the one on the left that had a good grazing plan. The one on the right, though, that one was overgrazed, and you notice the upper part looks pretty compact to me. Like there's not a lot of structure going on. I don't see as many roots, and probably the most obvious thing that pops out is notice the color. It's definitely like lightening up as you move down, so that means that the organic matter is dropping pretty significantly. But looking on the left side, we could tell, you know, you could, with better management, have a nice thick chocolate cake epipedon with more organic matter deeper. Next slide. So there's a lot of things you can do though if your soil is not at its healthiest. We have a number of conservation practices. These are just a few in the book. On the left, I've got a picture of a stripper header. This was pretty cool. One of our producers over by Twin Falls was using it. The picture here, that wheat has already been harvested. It just nips the head off and it leaves a good 12 inches of stubble behind to armor that soil, protect it through the winter. Love that. We've got some compost, always great to add organic matter, feed your soil, fluff it up, increase that water holding capacity. Got some biochar in the middle. I meant to find a microscopic version, a picture of it. These things have crazy surface area too. A lot of little pores in there for microbe habitat. And then the picture on the right there, we were talking about some water management plans. So in this field, producers buried some soil moisture sensors that are running up this PVC pipe. And then there's also a rain gauge to check that the pivot is putting down the amount of water that he's expecting, you know, check his nozzles, make sure everything's fine-tuned. All right, so getting close to wrapping it up here. I wanted to end on a challenge. Do something for the soil, wherever you live in the world. You can feed your soil. If you're in an apartment, here's an example of a worm compost bin on a patio. Maybe that goes for your potted plants. If you're in the suburbs, maybe get some backyard chickens. You know, manure in the raised beds. Or, you know, if you got a 1,000-acre ranch, integrate those livestock. This is an example where they did some mob grazing, moving those cows every day. And well, they do 2 species. First come the cows, then come the chickens to spread out the manure. Everybody can do something to benefit the soil, no matter where you live. And that is what I got, other than here's some additional resources if you'd like to learn more. Web soil surveys, always a good place to start to learn about the soil in your area. I also have some story maps here. Also in the chat, we have some links if you missed my colleagues' earlier lunch and learns from this fall. We have presentations on other Idaho soil references by Tasha. Our state soil scientist, Sean, did a webinar on nitrate leaching potential in turf. So for those of you interested in water quality, if you didn't catch that, check out that recording. And for those of you that are GIS savvy, John, our GIS specialist, did a utilizing LiDAR webinar that might pique your interest. So with that, thank you for joining us. And if you got any questions, I'm around for a bit.
Can you define what a horizon is exactly?
Oh yeah, sorry. So soil horizon, that is can we get a picture on that slide, Tasha? It's a layer. So when we open up a pit and we're describing soils, we can break a horizon on pretty much anything we can quantify. You can break on color, on texture, volume of rocks, root density. But let's see. Well, yeah, you can kind of see. So like in this picture, there's a thin surface horizon or layer. And then I can see like a more blocky structural change. And then we get down into the DuraPan. There's at least 3 horizons right there in view.
Okay, so kind of like a soil stratum in a way. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Let's see, got any other questions out there? Nice job. All right, well, I guess we can end the recording there then. Thanks, everybody.